Welcome back to the Stephen Knight Show. I want to remind you, we're all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, and just everywhere. Just go to Stephen Knight Show. We're glad to be here on YouTube as well, Stephen Knight Show. So we're talking about everything regarding the George Floyd scenario, murder. We had coronavirus, and we had Ahmaud Arbery, who was murdered in February. Then Breonna Taylor was murdered last month. And then last week, today, we saw George Floyd murdered by, I say, 4 police officers. One has been charged for third-degree murder and for manslaughter. And they're expecting charges on the other 3 police officers who are involved in the situation. We welcome attorney Melanie Davis to join us. She's welcome back to the show. Melanie, what can you tell us from a legal standpoint of what we can expect, or what you think is going to happen?
Well, first of all, a lot of recent developments have occurred in the case. One of the major developments being that the governor of Minnesota appointed the attorney general to handle the case, so took it out of the arms of the county attorney, Mike Freeman. What you all may not know is a week prior to George Floyd's death, county attorney Mike Freeman had took a leave of absence and checked himself into rehab. So maybe that's why he was drunk when he charged Derek Chauvin with third-degree murder. Because that's the only explanation I could see as to why he would choose such a low charge to begin with. So let's talk about what murder is. And having a third degree of murder is very rare. Minnesota is one of the few states that has third degree murder. Most states only divide into 2 categories, and then the rest is are like manslaughter. So in Minnesota, murder in the first degree is whoever does any of the following is guilty of murder in the first degree and shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life if they cause the death of a human being with premeditation and with intent to affect the death of the person. So that's first degree. So premeditation and intent to cause their death. Okay, so that's first degree. Second degree is causes the death of a human being with the intent to affect the death, but without premeditation. So that's the difference between first and second degree murder in Minnesota. Now let's get to murder in the third degree, which is what Derek Chauvin is charged with. So murder in the third degree, whoever without intent to affect the death of any person causes the death of another by perpetrating an act imminently dangerous to others and evincing a depraved mind without regard for human life is guilty of murder in the third degree and may be sentenced to imprisonment for not more than 25 years. So the main thing in all 3 of these statutes is intent, right? So intent with premeditation, intent without premeditation, no intent, but the person's dead. Okay, so that's third degree murder. So let's talk about manslaughter. And I apologize if you hear noise in the background. I'm on curfew in LA. It started at 5 o'clock.
Oh yeah.
The police are out and there are helicopters out as well. So let's talk about manslaughter. Manslaughter in the first degree is basically, give me a second, proximately causes the death of another without intent to cause death by directly or indirectly, unlawfully, and so they cause their death. So like it's without intent. But second degree manslaughter is basically negligence. So by the person's culpable negligence, the person created an unreasonable risk and consciously takes chances of causing death or great bodily harm to another. So I mean, it's like criminal negligence essentially, right? Yeah. So let's talk about the other officers. So the other officers can possibly be charged with aiding and abetting, okay? Because in the charging document, one of the officers asked Chauvin, do you want to keep him like this? And Chauvin says, yeah. So he's basically aiding and abetting. And so a person is criminally liable for a crime committed by another if the person intentionally aids, advises, hires, counsel, or conspires with or otherwise procures the other to commit the crime. Now, let's talk about the charging document. So, the charging document basically states that I'm in a police state. The charging document basically states that George Floyd resisted arrest. We know from the surveillance video from the other store across the street that wasn't true. He never resisted arrest.
And the owner of the store that called the police on him for allegedly having the forgery check, he says he regrets doing that. He regrets calling the police on him.
It wasn't a check. It was a fake bill. It was a fake $20 bill. But either way, I mean, so the video shows that there was no resist to the arrest. And I think Atlanta or state of Georgia just outlawed that that knee, like you can't put somebody in a knee chokehold anymore, which is good. That position he was in on the ground face down is called the prone position. And it's a very deathly position to be in. And so let's talk about the coroner's report. So the Minnesota coroner said he died basically of heart failure. Well, Dr. Michael Biden, who's been doing autopsies since we were kids on HBO, said he died of asphyxiation. So if it's going to be a battle of experts, I think Dr. Michael Biden's going to win because he has legitimate background in this, and his high credentials, and has testified in hundreds, if not thousands, of murder cases.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? How come when a normal civilian is involved in a crime like that, they are immediately arrested? And throughout an investigation. But how come when it's police officers, sometimes they're suspended without pay, pending investigation? Why is it not an immediate arrest?
Well, I mean, think about who's doing the arresting, right? I mean, the county attorney, if you think about it, so in Minnesota, it's the Hennepin County Attorney. In Fulton County, where a lot of you are, well, some of you are, it's the Fulton County District Attorney, but whatever, it's the prosecutor, right? So the prosecutor works hand in hand with the police. They work with the sheriff's office, they work with the police, they work with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation or whatever Bureau of Investigation for whatever state that
GBI,
is. So, but I mean, for whatever, state. Right. So that's why, I mean, if you notice, Derek Chauvin was not perp walked. He was allowed to go home. He was allowed to turn himself in. And now apparently he's on suicide watch. I said, well, let him kill himself. He's a coward. And then also, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Parker.
We had to watch things being burned and protests being, taking place all over the country just for that to happen. We saw a man being murdered on camera, and we had to go to this extreme just to get him a third-degree murder charge that he was able to walk home, that he was able to, walk in and turn himself in on, get time with his family, get his situation together before, he was arrested. It took 2 days of this for them to do that. Imagine, and this was on camera. Imagine all of the other incidents that before we had camera phones. Abadou in New York in 1994, he was shot 41 times opening in front
of his own place,
his own apartment. And they thought the keys was a gun, and he died holding his keys in his hand, the hand that they claimed that he had a gun in. There were no cameras, but somebody being shot 41 times by police on their doorstep is insane. And they went to court and got away with it, and were able to explain that away.
Well, they moved the case to a different.
They moved the case to another
Albany
city. But not only that, just the way they set up the case. How they play the media, how they set up the case. To make it seem like these were just poor officers doing their jobs, which is not the case. And to answer Stephen's question, the reason they're not arrested is because everyone involved is part of the system that needs to be torn down. That is the simplest answer.
Correct. And that third degree charge, they're going to have to move that out of third and bring it into second or first. And the reason why I speak on this specifically, because everyone who studies mixed martial art or who is a part of a uniformed service, such as the police department or, Army or Navy or any type of uniformed service, if they've been there for a while, not even a while, that is a technique. It's called a blood choke. They teach you that in your first year of combat training. You're learning to kill people with your hands, with your body, and with weapons. That is one of the first choke. You learn air choke, blood choke. Every fighter who can.
That is true. That is so true.
Yeah, every
and
fighter who
it's actually illegal in the ring.
He knew what he was doing.
And had his hands in his pocket.
And because he knew what he was doing, that was leverage. So it was definitely not. What was the third degree? Not intentional.
Unintentional.
They're gonna have to move it somehow. Someone's gonna have to point to that specific.
That charge is only to set him up to somehow get off. We know that it's a bogus charge.
Everybody knows that was a blood choke. You ask any fighter, any amateur fighter, has been fighting at least a year, they're going to be able to tell you that, oh no, he was doing a blood choke. It's clear. The blood choke renders you unconscious or possibly death. Either one, whichever one you're going for, but like you said, to affect death. That's what he was.
Well, and intent is shown by action. So when someone's saying, I can't breathe, and just because you're saying I can't breathe doesn't mean you're able to breathe. You can still be grasping for air and struggling. You can talk during an asthma attack. So, I mean, you can be struggling for air and be able to talk. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of conservative, mayors, police chiefs speak out saying, well, he was talking so he could breathe. No, that's not true.
And then
also,
that's so ignorant.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah. And also, they knew each other.
Yeah.
Floyd was a security guard at it was a Mexican club, El Nuevo Rodeo. He was a security guard at the door. Derek Chauvin was an officer that sat in the patrol car for 17 years outside of that club.
Yeah.
They both worked on Tuesdays. He knew him.
Tuesdays and Sundays. And the thing was the club owner, she said that it was like you said, it was a Latin club. They have urban nights Tuesdays and Sundays. And she said that Derek worked there for 17 years, like you said. And she said he was always more aggressive with the black people that came than he was on Mexican nights.
Well, he's a Trump supporter, so yeah, he's racist. That's
Trump supporter. He was at the
and the police force is full of racist cops, and that's what I'm saying. It's a systematic issue. We have to tear down the system. There have to be new form of training. If you're scared of black people, you cannot be on the police force. Period. If your natural intent with seeing a black person is fear, your natural instinct and your natural reaction is fear, you cannot police black people. You can't police anyone. Because that's, what's the point of being a cop when you're supposed to diffuse situation? And what I heard was this man, had a bill that was, they claim was fake. I've gotten bills from the bank that wasn't real before. They don't check every single bill. And that could have been an honest mistake. The man was driving a Mercedes-Benz that I heard that, was a pretty new Mercedes that he was dragged out of.
But the point of the matter is the punishment did not suit the crime.
No.
Because you have a allegedly $20 counterfeit check does not mean that you should die.
Not even the question, he shouldn't even been handled the way he was handled. They should have been questioning him, hey, did you get the bill from the bank? It should have been a conversation. $20 is not a big deal for you to be going in there and acting like this is an end-all be-all situation.
Right. Most definitely.
He was a big black man that they were scared of.
Yeah. They react out of fear. They're normal, and that's what racism is fear. They fear what they don't understand. So their natural reaction is to go to violence with us.
Yeah.
And that can no longer be the case.
Yeah.
I think you should be required to live in the neighborhood that you patrol.
Yeah.
I think you shouldn't be policing where you don't live, and you shouldn't be coming from the suburbs into the city, into a neighborhood that you have no connection to.
Yeah.
I think there should be some skin in the game. Like, so, in order for these police shootings to stop, one thing that needs to happen is that not only do they need to be charged correctly, but they need to be sentenced correctly. So
exactly,
because they're getting a slap on the wrist. Amber Geiger, who shot and murdered both of John, got 10 years. She'll serve 5, and the judge hugged her. Like, who does that? So she's unseated when she comes up for re-election. Same thing with the judge in Chicago, who only sentenced the man who murdered Laquan McDonald to like nearly 8 years. That guy's up for release in February of 2022. So, Michael Vick got more time for killing dogs.
Yeah.
Then cops have been getting time for killing people. So that tells you what they think about black people. They value the lives of dogs more than black men and women.
Mm-hmm. What you gonna say, Chicken?
We're 1/4 human anyway. That's how we are on the book.
3/5. 3/5.
3/5.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and they should hit them in the pocket with the money too. Take their pensions. Stop giving the pensions to the families. Take their money.
Dick Gregory said something similar to that. Dick Gregory was saying that they need to be insured. Officers need to be insured. And he was explaining the whole system about how that would actually affect them. It's very similar to what you just said, basically. I agree with that method. And I agree with what Mel said about, living in these communities where they work, where they're policing.
Exactly. Yeah. Mel, go ahead.
One more thing. And as racist and and unpleasant as I view the state of Texas, not as a whole, but parts of Texas, the reputation for being racist and being Republican. That state, I read in one of the New York Post, a large newspaper, that they have the least amount of police involved incidents because they require not only
what was that kind of
they
state?
have the least amount of police involved violence and incidents because they require a college degree, which when you're in school, you're forced to be around people who are not like you, right? These cops are coming from the country, out of high school, been around all white people that were just as racist as they were, grew up in racist homes, and then joined the police force. So education changes that. When you're forced to be in a school where it may be 10% Black and maybe 3% Mexicans, but you've never been around those people, you start to see things differently. They are also required to train for a full 12 months of training, which requires mental health training. So, they have to see a therapist once a week. Their training is different. So they may harbor ill feelings towards Black, but they won't act on it. I don't care how you feel about me, as long as you don't treat me that way.
Exactly.
So I think there's a difference there. So yeah, they may be racist or prejudiced, but as long as they're not, we need that type of training. Police needs to be taken, the job as men of police needs to be taken more seriously from the top down. Maybe the pay need to be changed so we can attract those type of people, but there need to be some type of model on who can be a police officer.
I definitely agree. Mel, on closing, tell us, what do you think is going to happen in this case? I know we've seen this over and over again, but now we have this global outbreak and protest, and even with the rioting and looting. What do you think is going to happen?
Didn't we have the same with Mike Brown? Didn't we have the same with Eric Garner? Didn't we have the same? I mean, not to this extent. But there were protests in cities across the countries. Mike Brown's death pretty much sparked the Black Lives Matter movement. But what do I think? Even if they do revise the charges to first-degree murder, he'll probably get found guilty of either third-degree or the second-degree manslaughter, and he'll get a slap on the wrist. It's going to be the same old same. I don't have any faith in the system. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. I hope I share you all's views from the previous segment of hoping that this national uprising and protest and rioting causes some actual change, because as history has shown us, nonviolence has not gotten Black people anywhere. It's only violence that has gotten any movement in this country, and the death of Martin Luther King was what sparked, and also the death of John F. Kennedy. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Those dual deaths, because the Vice President Lyndon Johnson passed those laws after JFK and MLK were shot and killed. So it took a couple of deaths to get some legislation passed. Also, I think that we need some stronger federal civil rights legislation. The burden to prove a federal civil rights violation is very high. So that's why U.S. attorneys across the nation are afraid to charge these officers in these cases. Like, for instance, the officer in the Eric Garner case was not prosecuted by the state. And when it originally occurred during the Obama administration, Eric Holder, the attorney general, was like, we need to prosecute this case. But then it dragged on, and then Trump got into office, and then Bill Barr was the attorney general, and that case, it got dismissed. So who's in office is very important about these cases, because if you have a racist Republican president, a racist Republican attorney general, if you have conservative judges, if you have a 5-4 majority on the Supreme Court leaning conservative, these are people that are appointed for life.
Yeah.
These are federal judges appointed for life. And they are making the case law that works its way up to the Supreme Courts, in addition to the states that are having cases that go to the Supreme Court. So I think we need to vote. We need to vote out these. So for instance, Mike Freeman needs to be voted out. He said third-degree murder. So you see where he stands. He stands on the side of injustice and the blue line for the police, and he hasn't crossed it. So when these prosecutors and state's attorneys show their hand, believe them and vote them out. And I think voting them out, and then also voting out the judges who give these lenient sentences to officers who are prosecuted, and then convicted, but not sentenced appropriately.
Most definitely. It's very important to vote at the local level as well as the federal level, to vote, because that's what impacts your jurisdiction where you live. And I also want to shout out, because there are a lot of police officers that are doing the right thing. There are a lot of police officers who are kneeling with the protesters and showing their support. They're there to police the crowds, but they're there to show support. There are a lot of bad apples out there. A lot of bad apples, but there are some good police officers. So we thank you all for what you're doing. Mel Davis, thank you so much for joining us again tonight. I want to let you know when we come back, we have Sean Stockman from Boys to Men. So right back after this.